Arguments, more selfishness, more people ready to twist your words, drain your energy, and make everything about themselves. It feels like toxic behavior is no longer something rare that appears from time to time. It feels woven into daily life, into conversations, into relationships, into the quiet tension you sense when you walk into a room. And if you find yourself wondering why society seems to be producing more of these people than ever before, this feeling is not coming from imagination or exaggeration. There are real psychological, cultural, and social forces at work, slowly shaping an environment where toxic personalities are not only formed, but encouraged to multiply and thrive. When you look closely, the beginning of this shift does not come from cruelty itself. It begins with emotional numbness. Modern life is loud, fast, overstimulated, and constantly asking for attention. Screens demand focus. Notifications interrupt silence. Expectations pile up without pause. In this environment, people slowly lose the ability to sit with discomfort. They forget how to stay with an uneasy feeling long enough to understand it. They forget how to reflect deeply. They forget how to process emotions with patience and honesty. And when discomfort appears, as it always does in life, many people reach for the fastest escape available. Avoidance becomes a habit. Denial becomes a shield. Blame becomes a shortcut. Over time, these reactions harden into toxic coping mechanisms. Hurting others begins to feel easier than facing oneself. Projecting pain outward feels safer than turning inward with responsibility. When empathy is numbed again and again, a person stops noticing the impact of their actions. They stop feeling the weight of the harm they cause. This is often the quiet birthplace of the toxic mindset. Not evil, not intention, but unexamined avoidance practiced until it becomes identity. Alongside this numbness grows another powerful force, the culture of instant gratification. Everything moves quickly now. Entertainment is immediate. Communication is constant. Validation is measured in numbers and arrives in seconds. Patience becomes unnecessary. Depth becomes inconvenient. When speed merges with entitlement, something subtle but dangerous forms. People begin to believe they deserve satisfaction without effort, results without growth, attention without contribution. In this climate, toxic behavior is not punished. It is rewarded. Manipulation thrives when shortcuts are praised. Selfishness feels justified when personal desire is framed as self-care without responsibility. Emotional maturity becomes optional because taking from others appears easier than building oneself. And when a society repeatedly reinforces these patterns, it teaches people that character is secondary to outcome. What matters is not how you move through the world, but what you can extract from it. Yet beneath speed and entitlement lies an even deeper shift, one that happens quietly and often goes unnoticed. Emotional illiteracy is spreading. Many people learn how to express opinions, but never learn how to express feelings. They learn how to argue, but not how to reflect. They learn how to accuse, but not how to take responsibility. Without these skills, the nervous system defaults to survival mode. And survival mode rarely looks calm or wise. It often looks aggressive, it looks defensive, it looks manipulative. Toxic people are not born fully formed. Many are emotionally undeveloped adults who learn to function through control instead of connection. They learn to dominate conversations instead of understanding them. They learn to protect themselves through force rather than presence. And in a society that rarely teaches emotional education, these patterns are passed down, normalized, and left unchallenged. What makes this more dangerous is that society continues to reward these behaviors. Social media amplifies the loudest voices, not the wisest ones. Harshness travels faster than nuance. Conflict attracts more attention than clarity. Entertainment turns narcissistic traits into personality brands. Influencers turn selfishness into confidence and call it empowerment. Algorithms push drama because drama keeps people watching. And slowly, the platforms shaping collective values begin feeding the very traits that create toxic personalities: envy, comparison, insecurity, and the hunger to dominate. Each time someone gains attention through cruelty or manipulation, the message becomes stronger. This works, do more of this. The reinforcement is subtle but constant, and over time, it reshapes what people believe is acceptable, admirable, and effective. Beneath all of these external forces lies something even more fundamental: a growing disconnection from the self. When a person does not know who they are, they search for identity through power. When they do not feel grounded, they seek control. When they cannot sit with their own emptiness, they look for external targets to blame. And when they fear their own weaknesses, they attack the weaknesses of others. This is why tearing people down brings temporary relief to toxic individuals. It distracts them from the inner void they refuse to face. It creates the illusion of strength without requiring growth. It gives them a sense of superiority without demanding self-examination. But this relief never lasts. It must be repeated again and again, growing louder each time, because it is built on avoidance rather than truth. What is rarely spoken about is how fragile society has become. People are breaking more quickly. They are overwhelmed by information, insecure in identity, and desperate for any sense of control. And when someone feels powerless inside, they often attempt to reclaim power by taking it from others. This is not wisdom. It is a distorted survival strategy. But as emotional resilience declines, this strategy becomes more common. Toxic behavior becomes a mask. It hides vulnerability the person does not know how to manage. It hides fear they were never taught to name. It hides pain they learn to suppress instead of heal. And because the mask appears strong, it is rarely questioned. This is why moving through the world today can feel like navigating emotional landmines. You speak to someone, and you cannot predict whether kindness or aggression will respond. You share an opinion, and suddenly someone feels attacked. You set a boundary, and it is treated as betrayal. People are not developing stronger identities. They are developing thinner skins. And thin skin combined with high ego creates the perfect conditions for toxic reactions. As a result, even ordinary interactions become battlegrounds. Words are twisted not because they are unclear, but because insecurity needs an enemy. Outbursts happen not because of the present moment, but because of accumulated overwhelm. Blame replaces accountability because fixing oneself feels hard. CR, then accusing others. Manipulation replaces honesty because vulnerability feels too dangerous. Society did not simply produce toxic people. It created an environment where toxicity becomes the default response for anyone who feels threatened by life, by struggle, or by their own reflection. And perhaps the saddest part of all is this. Most toxic people do not know they are toxic. They believe they are defending themselves. They believe they are standing in their truth. They believe they are doing what they must to survive. Emotional dysfunction is mistaken for strength. Control is mistaken for confidence. And because there is little pressure to grow, little incentive to self-reflect, and almost no accountability for destructive behavior, the illusion remains intact. The world is changing faster than many people can process. And instead of adapting with awareness, many collapse into patterns that harm themselves and those around them. Without understanding these patterns, without recognizing them early, you can easily absorb the emotional fallout of a society slowly losing its depth. And this shift does not stop with others. It reaches you as well. You begin to change in response. You become more cautious. You trust less easily. You build walls where openness once lived. You expect manipulation before kindness. Your nervous system stays alert because it has learned how common toxic behavior has become. And little by little, society becomes a place where people do not relate. They defend, they do not listen, they react, they do not connect, they compete for emotional territory. This is the direction the collective is drifting. Another force quietly accelerating this shift is the erosion of consequences. In the past, harmful behavior carried weight, communities pushed back, reputations suffered, people felt the social cost of cruelty. Today, it is easier to escape. Accountability. Bridges can be burned and replaced. Circles can be changed. Identities can be reinvented. Platforms can be swapped. The past can be abandoned without reflection. When accountability becomes optional, toxic behavior multiplies. Nothing slows it down. Nothing forces correction. And without friction, patterns spread freely. This lack of consequence emboldens toxicity. People learn they can criticize without restraint. But the moment you respond, you are labeled sensitive or difficult. Boundaries are weaponized. Psychological language is twisted to excuse behavior that has no intention of changing. Emotional discomfort is treated as injustice. And toxic individuals learn to manipulate this weakness with precision. At the deepest level, toxicity rises because modern life rewards appearance over substance. People want to look confident rather than become confident. They want to seem superior rather than grow wiser. They want admiration without self-improvement. Performing a personality becomes easier than developing character. And when ego grows larger than maturity, toxicity fills the empty space. This is why reasoning with toxic people often feels impossible. They are not defending ideas. They are defending identity. They are not seeking truth. They are seeking dominance. They are not interested in solutions. They are interested in control. Every conversation becomes a battlefield because honesty threatens the fragile self-image they depend on. And the more fragile the inner world becomes, the more aggressive the outer behavior appears. The rise in toxicity is inseparable from the decline in self-awareness. Few people pause anymore. Few reflect. Few examine the patterns guiding their reactions. Life is lived in constant motion, constant response. And when someone lives in reaction, disagreement feels like attack. Challenge feels like disrespect. Bound. Aries feel like rejection. Emotional intelligence cannot grow where silence and reflection are absent. But within this truth lies something that gives you strength. The rise of toxic people does not mean you are powerless. It means awareness is more valuable than ever. The more chaotic society becomes, the more grounding matters. The more unstable others become, the more your stability stands out. And the more manipulation becomes normal, the more clarity protects you. You are not responsible for fixing toxic people. You are not required to change them. Understanding how they operate is enough. It allows you to stop internalizing their dysfunction. It allows you to remain centered while they remain reactive. And this understanding creates something they cannot tolerate: emotional independence. When you stay grounded, they lose leverage. When you stay calm, they lose influence. When you stay self-aware, they lose the ability to distort your reality. Toxic people rely on confusion. They weaken in the presence of clarity. And clarity grows the moment you understand why modern society is producing more of them. Continue strengthening your mind. Continue building emotional boundaries. Continue practicing response instead of reaction. You live in a world where toxic behavior is increasing, but that only makes your awareness more necessary than ever. And as you continue to move through this world, you begin to see how deeply this environment shapes human behavior. When toxicity becomes common, it stops shocking people. When manipulation becomes frequent, it starts to feel normal. And when emotional immaturity surrounds you long enough, even calm presence can feel unfamiliar. This is how societies slowly lose their emotional center, not through sudden collapse, but through gradual erosion of depth, patience, and inner discipline. People stop asking who they are becoming and focus only on how they are perceived. Reflection is replaced by reaction. Awareness is replaced by impulse. And when life feels overwhelming, many do not slow down to understand it. They harden themselves against it. They confuse emotional armor with strength, but armor carried too long begins to crush the person wearing it. In such an environment, toxicity spreads not because people desire harm, but because they have forgotten how to relate without defense. Every interaction becomes a test of power. Every conversation becomes a subtle negotiation of dominance. Kindness is seen as weakness. Calm is misinterpreted as passivity. And presence is overlooked because it does not demand attention. The loudest behavior sets the tone, and quieter wisdom is pushed aside. This is why emotional intelligence now feels rare. Not because people lack intelligence, but because they lack stillness. Without stillness, emotions are never digested. Without digestion, they ferment into resentment. And resentment, when left unchecked, seeks expression. It leaks out through sarcasm. It hardens into contempt. It erupts as cruelty disguised as honesty. As this pattern repeats across families, workplaces, and communities, it reshapes collective expectations. People stop expecting understanding. They stop expecting accountability. They stop expecting growth. They expect conflict. They prepare for disappointment. And when expectation lowers, behavior follows. Toxicity no longer stands out. It blends in. But awareness allows you to see what others cannot. You begin to recognize that most toxic behavior is rooted in fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of being insignificant, fear of sitting alone with unresolved pain. And because fear is uncomfortable, it is projected outward. Control replaces curiosity, judgment replaces listening, and dominance replaces connection. Understanding this does not excuse the behavior. It simply removes the confusion. You stop asking why they are this way and start seeing how they became this way. And in that clarity, you regain your footing. You stop personalizing what was never about you. You stop carrying emotional weight that does not belong to you. You stop trying to heal wounds you did not create. This is where inner discipline becomes essential. In a toxic environment, your nervous system must be trained, not left reactive. Calm must be cultivated, not assumed. Boundaries must be clear, not explained endlessly. When you respond instead of react, you interrupt the pattern. When you remain grounded, you refuse to be pulled into chaos. And this quiet refusal is powerful. Toxic people often seek emotional reactions because reactions give them control, confusion feeds them, doubt empowers them. When you stay centered, their influence dissolves. They cannot manipulate clarity, they cannot dominate presence, and they cannot thrive where self-awareness is strong. This is why self-work matters more now than ever before, not as a trend, not as a performance, but as a discipline. The more unstable the external world becomes, the more stable your internal world must be. The more people avoid responsibility, the more important your integrity becomes, and the more society drifts into emotional noise, the more valuable silence and reflection are. You begin to see that protecting your energy is not selfish, it is necessary. You learn that boundaries are not punishments, they are guidance, and you understand that walking away from dysfunction is not weakness, it is clarity. You do not owe your peace to people who thrive on disturbance. As this understanding deepens, something subtle shifts inside you. You stop engaging in battles that were never meant to be won. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstand. You stop trying to prove your worth to those who benefit from doubting it. And in this restraint, strength grows. Society may continue moving toward emotional fragmentation. Platforms may continue rewarding outrage. Personalities may continue inflating without substance. But your task is not to fix the collective. Your task is to remain rooted within it, to move with awareness where others move with impulse, to respond with presence where others react with fear. This is how you stay whole in a world that is forgetting itself. You observe, you understand, you choose differently. And through that choice, you protect your mind, your energy, and your direction. The rise of toxic people is not a sign to harden your heart. It is a reminder to strengthen your awareness. It is a signal to refine your boundaries. And it is an invitation to cultivate emotional depth in a time that often avoids it. So continue the inner work, continue practicing restraint, continue choosing clarity over chaos. You live in a world where toxic people are multiplying, but that only makes your self-awareness more powerful and more necessary than ever. And if you want to continue strengthening your mind and staying emotionally grounded in a world that is slowly losing its balance, stay present for what comes next. Your clarity, your awareness, and your growth matter more now than ever. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more.